Okay, welcome to a class on phrases and clauses. This is a class that is supposed to revise a lot of the topics we have already seen, because we have already seen noun phrases, noun clauses, adjectival phrases, adjectival clauses, and adverbial phrases, adverbial clauses. And I want to really focus on the idea that this defining, non-defining logic you see here and here, and this coordinate cumulative logic you certainly see here and here. And these two ideas about defining, non-defining, and coordinate and cumulative, these distinctions will help you with commas, especially with commas. And we will look in greater detail in the section on called commas about when we should use commas and when we shouldn't use commas. But we'll mention some things today because we'll look at some parts from the books that we're studying. So Lord of the Flies, 1984, Frankenstein, and Animal Farm. But let's start with noun phrase and noun clause. And I want to make it very clear that when I say phrase, I mean a non-finite clause. I've noticed that online lots of websites call phrases non-finite clauses. Okay, that's fine. They just mean that it doesn't have a doer, yeah? Because non-finite verbs don't have a doer, do they? They don't have an overt subject. And so a phrase doesn't have a subject and a verb. It doesn't have a finite verb. It has a non-finite verb, and perhaps that's why they call them non-finite clauses. But I'm going to call them phrases, okay? Because I like the simplicity of the word phrase, and it means we don't get phrases mixed up with clauses that have finite verbs with doers. Okay, so let's have a look at the difference between a noun phrase and a noun clause. And I do want to make it clear that some phrases do contain a subject and a verb. Yeah, this is a noun phrase. It's just a person, the priest that you met yesterday. Yeah, he's not doing anything, the priest that you met yesterday. And yet you see, wrapped up inside this noun phrase, a subject and a verb. In other words, you see a clause inside the phrase. That is a relative clause. It's an adjectival clause that starts with the pronoun that, yeah? But we may drop that pronoun, which makes things even more confusing. Because even if you say the priest you met yesterday, that's still a relative clause, even though it doesn't have the relative pronoun that inside it. We can omit this relative pronoun. We can't omit who or which or whose, but we can omit that. And it's still a relative clause, guys. You met yesterday is still describing the priest. But the whole thing, if we take the whole thing and not just this part, the whole thing is a phrase and not a clause. It's a phrase because the priest isn't doing anything. That's the main idea here, guys. If he's doing something, we've got a clause, we've got a finite verb, we've got a doer and a verb. But he's just sitting there, the priest that you met yesterday, he's not doing anything. This relative clause describes the priest, and in that sense, the finite clause is subordinate to the noun. And so it's just a noun phrase. Priest is the head word there. Okay, so I think that's very important, that some noun phrases have a clause inside them, an adjectival clause, but they are still, all of it taken together, it's still just one thing, and so it's a noun. It's a noun phrase. It's not to be confused with noun clauses. They are different. Okay, but let's have a look. There are lots of different types of noun phrase that you could have, but the main idea is that they're always subject or object of a verb or object of a preposition. Now, I shouldn't say always, because you have things like appositives, and they're not exactly one of these. They're like an additional bit of information, and I imagine appositive means something like additional. So it's an additional way of referring to that noun. And so this isn't always the case, but most of the time it is. You know, a noun, it has got to be a subject or object of preposition most of the time. Okay, so that handsome charming fellow, we could make it the subject of the verb. That handsome charming fellow gave me £10. Or we could make it the object of a verb. I gave £10, in fact, or object of preposition. I gave £10 to that